Can folks hear me? Thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. Okay. As Nikki said, my name is Olivia Santoro. I'm the Deputy Field Director for the ACLU of Massachusetts. And I started just after Trump was inaugurated the first time in 2017. And so this feels awfully familiar. But that means that I also feel prepared, and I've got a lot of faith in the team that we have at the ACLU to really hit the ground running in January. And so tonight I wanted to talk about a few issues related to what we're calling Firewalls for Freedom. And this is about state level legislation that we can take action on in the coming 2-year legislative session. And a lot of these issues also have municipal counterparts as well. So there's an opportunity to work not just on the state level, but also locally in your own municipalities. So I'm going to be touching on immigration, which you're going to hear a lot about tonight. I'm also going to speak to digital privacy, which implicates a lot of different things that impact us. And then I'm also going to talk about freedom of expression, specifically as it relates to our students' right to learn. I think you're sort of familiar with book ban attempts across the country and here in Massachusetts, so I'm going to talk a little bit about that as well. So starting at the top with what can we do here in Massachusetts as it relates to immigration. We often think of this as a federal issue, but that doesn't mean that there aren't things that we can do here in Massachusetts to secure our immigrant communities. And one of the things that we can do is to prevent collaboration between ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, with our local law enforcement agencies. Right now in Massachusetts, there are 2 kinds of ICE-related contracts that are operating on the local level. One is called a 287G agreement. Is anyone familiar with that? I see a few hands. So 287G agreements are contracts between local law enforcement in Massachusetts, primarily with sheriff's departments, and federal immigration, and it basically deputizes local law enforcement to act as federal immigration in our local communities. Right now, there is only one remaining 287G contract in Massachusetts. It's with the Department of Corrections. There used to be several county-level contracts as well, but fortunately, the last of those was terminated by Sheriff Buckley, who came in on the Cape, and she terminated the very last county contract. Really want to emphasize that 287G contracts are completely voluntary. Not every sheriff or law enforcement agency has these contracts with the federal government, but Massachusetts up until very recently had quite a number of these, including in Bristol County under then Sheriff Tom Hodgson. I think that name is familiar to many of you. And the Department of Homeland Security actually terminated that contract on their own. And so these are voluntary contracts. We don't want our sheriff's departments to be entering into these agreements, and the trend is moving away from that in Massachusetts for sure. But there is currently one left with the Department of Corrections. The second contract that exists is called an IGSA agreement, and that stands for Intergovernmental Service Agreement. And these agreements are, again, between local law enforcement and the federal government. And in this case, it's about renting jail space to ICE to detain people for immigration detainees. And I'm excited to be here in Plymouth County because the last remaining IGSA agreement is here in Plymouth County. And so we're going to be calling on all of you as we move into the new year to really advocate with your legislators to end that IGSA contract. So we are proposing, I see Helena coming in. We are proposing legislation. We actually introduced this for the first time during the last legislative session, and we're going to be coming back again in January with a bill to encourage the legislature to end those contracts and to not re-sign any more going forward. It's important to know that sheriffs have the power in Massachusetts to enter into federal contracts with the federal government without any executive oversight from the state. And so it's even sometimes hard to know how many and what kinds of contracts exist. And so I also want to encourage you to pay attention to your sheriff and what your sheriff is doing because they have this power. They're elected every 6 years, which is the longest term in Massachusetts besides our U.S. senators. So we don't have it doesn't come around that often, the opportunity to vote for them, and so I really encourage you to pay attention to what your sheriff is doing as it relates to immigration enforcement. In addition to the state level legislation that we're going to be supporting, there's always opportunities to also do that work on the local level, specifically through something that we call welcoming city ordinances. And these are local laws that, again, discourage collaboration between local law enforcement and ICE. We don't want to be inquiring about people's immigration status when they're stopped for a traffic offense, and we don't want to be aiding ICE when we don't need to be doing that. And so if anyone here is interested in putting forward a welcoming city ordinance in their town or city, please come see me. We have really fantastic immigration advocates on staff. My colleagues Laura and Javier would be really happy to help you through that process. The second bucket that I want to touch on relates to this issue of digital privacy, and it's really about making sure that our laws are keeping up with the pace of technology. So there's a bill that we introduced for the first time during the last legislative session as well, called the Location Shield Act. And that bill would prohibit the sale of cell phone location information that is collected from our personal cell phones, usually through the various apps and programs that we use. And this has implications for really anyone with a cell phone. It affects all of us who have a cell phone, but there are particular groups of people that are most vulnerable because there is an unregulated market of data brokers who are purchasing this information, and they're allowed to sell it to anybody with a credit card. And there's a couple of instances that you might have seen in the news over the last couple of years. We're particularly concerned about people who are seeking abortion care, those who are in Massachusetts, but also those people who might be traveling to Massachusetts to receive care. And so there have been a couple of public instances of data brokers selling this to various anti-abortion groups, and then those groups using that information to target people who have been to abortion clinics. So there was one example that came out last year where there was this group that ran an anti-abortion ad campaign, and it specifically targeted people who had been to abortion clinics themselves. So it can get that granular. It can be really scary. We've also seen instances. There was a church, I believe it was in Colorado, that purchased cell phone location data to out gay priests who were then eventually forced to step down. This information could also be used to target undocumented immigrants, people seeking gender-affirming care, victims of domestic violence. It can be really dangerous when our personal location information gets into the wrong hands. And it can be really easy to paint a picture of our everyday lives based on that location information. You know, if you log onto an app, you know, maybe you check the weather at your home in the morning, and then you use something to get coffee, you're maybe playing a game on your phone, on the train, on the way to work. Like, all of these moments can paint a picture of your whereabouts throughout the day. And anyone with a credit card can purchase that information. So this bill would prohibit the sale of cell phone location information in Massachusetts. So it's not a federal bill, so we can't stop that in other parts of the country, but we can create a black box in Massachusetts. So anyone coming into Massachusetts, basically that data disappears as soon as they would cross state lines. Before we launched this campaign for the first time in 2023, we did a poll of general voters to see how people felt about this issue. And it was the most popular issue we have ever worked on. 90% of Massachusetts voters felt that we should prohibit the sale of cell phone location information, and that was across the political aisle. And so this is a really, really popular issue that I think people instinctively understand. I think when it comes to privacy, people get that, and it sort of crosses these political barriers. And so we really want to harness that energy to come back in January for the next legislative session to pass that bill, because it's not just a technology issue. This impacts all of the different things that we care really deeply about.
What is the name of the bill again?
It's called the Location Shield Act. And then the third thing I'll touch on before passing it off to Helena is this kind of broad category of freedom of expression, which is an issue very near and dear to the ACLU, and specifically around students' right to learn, to access educational materials and books in their schools that are reflective of who they are, their life experiences, and the people around them without political interference. And so I'm curious if folks in this room have experienced a book ban attempt in their local district. Wow, yep. Do folks want to just shout out where that is? Right here in town. Right here in town, yeah.
Rochester.
Yep. Dartmouth? Okay. So this is an issue I think everybody here is pretty intimately familiar with. And I think for people who haven't been maybe touched personally by it, it might shock people to hear that that's happening in Massachusetts. The American Library Association has a lot of really great information on their website about book ban attempts and challenges, and Massachusetts is up there with states that you might not consider as being in the same category, like Florida and Texas. We see dozens of attempts every year to restrict access to learning materials in schools, and the people who are trying to do that in our local communities. It's usually thinly veiled racism, transphobia, homophobia, but doesn't often come out as explicitly as you might think. And so you might see policy attempts that sort of like skirt the issue just a little bit. There was an instance in Ludlow. I'm happy to send this letter around because it's really a great read. One of our former attorneys wrote a letter to the Ludlow School Committee in response to a proposal that they had put together to restrict access to certain learning materials. And what they were getting at is that they didn't want students in schools reading about LGBTQ stories and lives, but they tried to paint it as preventing students from seeing things that were sexually explicit, and under that banner, very common images that we are familiar with would not be allowed to be seen. And so our Ruth Borkwin, our former senior attorney, wrote this really fantastic letter of all of the things that actually you're talking about if this policy were to come into effect. And so if anyone wants to read it, I'm happy to send it around. But it's important for us to be vigilant to those kinds of things that are going to be popping up in our local districts. There was a bill introduced by Senator Sear last year that would help to create a policy for how schools can handle book challenges, because often what we find is that when there's a good policy in place, we're able to kind of really peel back the reasons for why people are challenging these books, and they often fall apart. And so it's really important that we're relying on our educators and our librarians to make choices about what is appropriate for young people to be reading, and to have a good policy and procedure in place in our local school districts, so that we don't get caught up in these sort of cultural wars that are impacting students across the Commonwealth. So we'll be supporting that bill as well in the next 2 years. And if you're also interested locally, just taking a look at what kind of policies your districts have, we're also happy to help you with that. So I'll take more questions at the end, but I'll pass it off to Helena.
I'd like to formally introduce Helena DaSilva Hughes, who just walked in. Thank you. And just to follow up on something Olivia said in terms of the book banning or the book challenge policy, I forgot to introduce, I want to introduce some of our school committee members who are here. Matt Montero, on the Old Rochester Regional School Committee. Margaret McSweeney, where's Margaret? Is also a Mattapoisett representative. And the three of these individuals have had to deal in the last couple of years with book banning issues, and Matt was the individual who actually spearheaded taking on the book ban challenge by some of the local MAGA folks in Rochester and here in Mattapoisett. So great job with that. So I would now like to turn it over to Helena.
So, first of all, I have to apologize for being late. I had a South Coast Health, I'm a trustee, and I had a board meeting that I needed to attend, so I left there at 6 o'clock and was at UMass Dartmouth. So, first of all, I apologize for being late. I usually like to be here on time. So, first of all, thank you very much for inviting me to speak about what we are doing at the Immigrants Assistance Center. I have to say, so I think we've already gone through my bio, a little bit about the organization. The organization was started in 1971. During a time, there was a huge influx of Portuguese immigrants settling in our area, and in New Bedford specifically. And so a group of established businessmen and school teachers and decided that they wanted to help this new immigrants from Portugal that were arriving, so they created the Immigrants Assistance Center in 1971. Throughout the year, we've been helping immigrants from all different ethnic groups. So I'm just going to tell you a little bit about what happened and what's happening at the Immigrants Assistance Center. I have to say that when I got the election results, even before the election results, we already knew that we needed to start really informing and preparing our immigrant families in case there was a raid or in case they were facing deportation. And deja vu, the Michael Bianco raid kept coming up because during the Michael Bianco raid, we saw, Corinn and I, and I know Adrian, CCT, I mean, this is a group of community leaders that were really working together because we saw what happened on March 6, 2007, 6-degree weather in New Bedford, right? We were boots on the ground, we saw what was happening. I'll never forget, asking ICE, what's gonna happen to the children when they get home. These families there's a lot of children there, and then all they kept telling me, don't worry about it, we contracted DSS is gonna take care of it. So to me, it was like a nightmare. I've never remember, after 40 years of doing this type of work, that was probably the only time I actually needed to take a mental health day, and because I just couldn't handle it anymore. So I have to say that when I saw the election results, I kept saying, oh my God, we're going back to that again. And I never thought we were going to do that. But again, we knew in 2016, when Trump got elected, we saw what happened to the center. We saw the amount of people coming in with lots of anxiety and what's going to happen to me. And we saw it at that time, there was no driver's bill, right? The driver's license bill took 20 years, or 30 years, 20 years before it passed. So we knew that a lot of in 2016, when I was getting a lot of calls, were people that were driving without a license and had to go to third district court and pay a citation, and they were getting picked up by immigration as they were leaving the courthouse. So that's what I kept hearing over and over and over again. And then we started doing that Know Your Rights, and I have these red cards. I'm sure all of you have seen it. We have them in different languages, in English and in Spanish and in English and in Portuguese and English and Haitian Creole, and we can get all these cards in different languages. The reason why we thought this was extremely important, of course, I'm a board member at the ACLU, and I joined this year, and it was like, what a perfect timing to join the ACLU. Yes. So we've been, of course, working, getting a lot of your information. And so one of the things that we are doing, aside from giving these cards out to everyone in schools, churches, and just making sure that people have these cards. Why? Because these cards basically said we all have fundamental rights. Mm-hmm. So if they are stopped by immigration, they do not have to say anything. They can remain silent and basically not answer any questions. And if they have this card, it's a good thing to also give to them. Mm-hmm. Another thing to ICE, another things that we are doing, which is so important, is the emergency family preparedness. What is the emergency family preparedness? Is giving them a plan. So for example, I'm just going to use me and Lisa as an example. Let's say I'm undocumented and I have children, and Lisa is a US citizen and a very dear friend of mine, which she is. But let's just say that I will say, so there's an affidavit that I will sign, that what I'm doing is if I get picked up by ICE, I automatically, Lisa has the authority to pick up my children from school, bring them to the doctors, and so this affidavit is really important. A copy goes to the school, a copy goes to the doctor's office, and of course she has the original. And also making sure that these children all have passports. We gotta get passports to these children, making sure that all these documents are in order, and making sure it's in a safe deposit box. We do not want documents in a house, because if there's a knock on the door and you open the door, immigration can search your house. So if you have these documents in the safe deposit box, they're away from the house. And of course, you need to make sure that someone knows exactly where things are. We're also telling people to remember a phone number. Nobody remembers phone numbers. The only number I remember is my mother, and that's because she still has a landline, because everybody has cell phones. So making sure that people remember have a cell phone number or a phone that they can remind, making sure if you have an attorney to have a, see, these are just basic things that we take for granted. But I remember when we started doing these in 2016, it was just so heart-wrenching, because you saw people crying, what are we going to do, Helene? And it's just really, but it's important, because knowledge is power. So the more information we give out, and making sure that that there's a plan, because I do not know of anyone who wants to leave their children behind. I think one of the biggest issues during the Michael Bianco raid is when the ICE asked if they had children, a lot of them said no, because they were afraid they were going to take their children away. So I know we all want our children, and I don't care which country you're from, you want to bring your children. So at least if you have this emergency family preparedness plan and you have the documents in order, I think hopefully they don't need it, but if they need it, there is a plan in place, so these families can be reunited, because we know if there isn't a plan, that DCF, then children belong to the state, right? So we just do not want to do this. So I have to say that these emergency family preparedness is really sad. We've been doing, I actually have done it with the ethnic media. We've been utilizing the ethnic media a lot and the social media to just give them as much as information as we possibly can. And so that is what we've been doing. We've been getting a lot of calls of people crying. We also know that, if they have Mass Health Limited or if they have Mass Health, what's happening is if they think there's a public charge, right? And we saw that in 2016 was a public charge. That means if you're utilizing benefits, you can actually, it's going to jeopardize your immigration case. So then now there's this rumor about the public charge. So there's a lot of rumors around. Then people really believe it, and people are afraid. Some students say, well, does that mean I have to drop out of school and I'm afraid? So there's a lot of fear and anxiety that is happening with these families. And my big concern too is what's happening to these children. I remember as a kid, I used to eavesdrop on my parents talking, because I was always very curious about what they were saying. I was nosy, I guess. I used to get in a lot of trouble, to tell you the truth. But I'm thinking about myself. So what I'm thinking is, these kids, don't you think they're listening to what's happening? And if they're listening, how are they focusing in school, right? So I'm just thinking, it's really, I'm really, of course, extremely worried about what's going to happen in January 20th. Another thing we're seeing a lot, and I'm afraid of, is scams. We had a lady that just called me yesterday. She had paid $17,000 and she's throughout the years for her to get a green card, which I know she's not going to be able to get a green card. So we're seeing a lot more people scamming. A lot of people who are not attorneys, notarios, or even attorneys who know that they can take advantage of these people because they're in such desperate need. We're seeing that, so that is, we're seeing a lot of scams. So I think one of the things we tell I have a great team, is that we just need to inform and educate, making sure that these families are prepared in case ICE knocks on the door, or if they get picked up, they need to have a plan and so they can be reunited with the children. So this has been very sad times, and I don't think it's going to get any better. I'm trying to be positive in all of this, but it's been very difficult when you get people calling you and crying about what they're going to do next, and the impact that it will have on the children. So I don't know if anybody has any questions. I know Corinn, so I just don't want to. Can you hear me?
Barely.
You can't hear me? Oh my God, I have such a big mouth. I'm surprised. I have 5 brothers and a sister. We always have to be so loud. Yeah, so I don't know if you have any questions, and I'll have Corinn. Yeah, so let me just pass these around for anybody who wants them.
Well, we're gonna do questions at the end of the.
Okay, good. So do you want,
Yeah, go ahead and
pass it around, and I also, okay, great.
Thank you
so much.
Corinn?
Yeah. And thank you so much for inviting me. I see a lot of familiar faces here, and really heartened by the turnout tonight, to see that there's so much support for vulnerable communities like the ones that we serve every day, and hear from in our day-to-day work. We're another organization that's kind of on the ground. We see lots and lots of people who are immigrants, but we never ask about status. We don't care, we don't know, but it's that kind of anxiety that started from day one. The first phone call I got the day after the election was a mom who just had a baby in St. Luke's Hospital, and she's from Guatemala. She happens to be undocumented, but her child is now a U.S. citizen. So she's saying, what happens if I get sent back to Guatemala? Will my child have to stay here? What kind of documents do I need to bring her back with me? So those kinds of things are pretty common at the CEDC. We see tons of people walking in with all kinds of different questions, all kinds of different concerns. But what I take with me every single day is the sheer strength and resilience of immigrant communities. That from day one, that our neighborhoods, our communities, especially in Massachusetts, have been built by immigrant communities, and the place where I spend all my time in the North End has been waves of immigrants who have extended a hand to their relatives to get them settled, to provide refuge, to flee from violence, to open up a business, to buy a new home, to raise their families. So there's an incredible strength and resilience in immigrant communities. And I think of anything, when we think back to the Bianco raid, we were on the ground, we were, doing all kinds of stuff, all kinds of organizing happened, and people stepped up and people spoke out, and we really put a black eye on the federal government and said, this is not gonna happen in New Bedford. We're not gonna stand by. And this is gonna happen, and I think there's enough support and energy in our communities to also resist and say, no, we're not gonna have it. And there's plenty of people around who can step up and do what they can. There's a saying in Spanish, un granito de arena, that everybody has their grain of sand to contribute. There's a lot of people in this room who might have abilities to teach other people. There might be people who, maybe they're not an immigration attorney, but maybe they have some legal skills. Maybe they can organize volunteers. Maybe they can do all kinds of different things. So our work is working side by side with the immigrant community, recognizing their strengths, their abilities to organize themselves and to fight back, but also providing that level of support. So that's what we've been kind of thinking about. We're doing a lot of the same things that is happening at IAC. We're working on family preparedness, taking the affidavits, and working on the information about how to collect your documents, how to go to the consulate and get your Guatemalan passport. We've sponsored, like the Salvadoran consulate has done mobile consulates over at our place. But creating that network, communicating with each other, staying close together to be able to provide that level of support and resistance, to speak out, to amplify those voices, like you just said, Nikki, to tell those stories, because everyone, from every person that I speak to, that I encounter from Central America, has found great, have gone through a lot. And through the trauma from back home, facing violence in Central America during the conflicts, arriving and putting everything, everything on the line to come to the United States, sometimes leaving loved ones and families behind in order so that they can help to support work and support their families, even though they're getting exploited and making, not making adequate wages. There's that level of strength and resilience. So it's so important for us to stick together because there's so much overlap between what the assaults are. It's the assaults on vulnerable communities that are immigrant communities, assaults on women, trans, sexual orientation. It's the whole ball of wax, and we all see those common threads. But it's so important that we're here tonight and we're here together to unite and to kind of set out a plan to not be afraid, to be able to speak out, and to figure out what your grain of sand is. And we're happy to work with you and find out what that is. We have an event going on at the CEDC on January 15th, which is a solidarity dinner or volunteer orientation, so that if someone is interested in, I have a slide with
Yeah.
I have a slide, and I have a couple of handouts. If you guys want to take the QR code and learn more about the CEDC, learn more about volunteer opportunities, we would love to have you and love to have you find out a little bit more. And I think I'll leave it there, and we can talk more.
All right. Hello. Loud enough? Too loud? All right. Okay. Well, thank you. Hi. Sorry. I'm so very happy to be back in Mattapoisett. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Franny. I'm going to just go ahead and first hold so much gratitude for the work that all three of you do, and thank all of you for showing up here tonight. I think, you know, we chanted, we yelled, we're not going back, and yet here we are. And rather than going back or thinking of it as going back, I think we might as well just look at it as we've hopped upon a whole new shitstorm. So here we are. Let's get used to it. Let's get accustomed to it. But let's look left, look right around the people in the room and realize on a random Tuesday night in December, this many people showed up in Mattapoisett just to think, what can we do? And that's something. And if there's nothing else you can hang on to in this moment right now, that's your something. That's your something. You've got one thing right there. As we've all been through, my name is Jess Laverty. I had the absolute privilege of becoming a huge mega fan of the DeMacus family back in 2022 when I dragged Rasan down here because we decided we are going to do a grassroots campaign. And by doing that, we are literally just going to physically show up in community. We knocked on the door at the Mattapoisett General Store. I bought my favorite hoodie ever. And we had a conversation and basically lucked out into endearing ourselves and being endeared by the most wonderful family that we've ever had the privilege of being friends with. And in that moment, we started being part of a community. And that's a little bit of what I want to talk to y'all about. More so than focusing on any particular challenge and threat that we're going to face, because inevitably we are we are in a position where we are going to be very, very overwhelmed by the onslaught. And to be quite frank, I'm not an expert in, hi Sharon, I didn't see you, sorry. I'm not an expert in any of these particular threats that we will see, but this is why we're lucky. We have people sitting here like Lisa who can help us with any sort of assaults upon our labor, our unions, anything like that. We have everyone here who can help us with any of the onslaughts that our immigrant neighbors and migrant families will feel. We have people, and we are so overwhelmingly lucky that we have resources within community and around Massachusetts. So what I am trying to do, in coordination with other Plymouth County Democratic Town Committee and City Committee chairs, as well as looking at the other 351 municipalities around the Commonwealth, is get folks together to get organized. Although you will not be able to see it on my tiny little phone, one of the first things that happened the day after the election was a email went out from the Massachusetts Republican Party. And what their first email came out and said, we're seeking candidates. Sign up, run for something. We have the momentum, we'll train you. So what I say is, touche, we want candidates. But see, the thing is, not everybody's gonna be a candidate. Not everybody's gonna be a campaign manager. Somebody's gonna write a better, not tweet, a better blue sky flutter. I don't know what it is. Something better on blue sky. Trademark Jess. Something better on blue sky, or some Facebook post, or something, and communicate something better than any of us can. So what we're trying to do as a collaborative is build community. So not just what we have here today, because I know that all of us come from different communities and we have connections with different communities. Some of us are members of certain marginalized communities. Some of us are members of different geographic communities. Some of us work with people within certain communities. We all have something we bring, and with overlapping those communities, a la Rainbow Coalition pre-disaster, we have the ability to build people who may not come under the same umbrella, but we can all work together in coalition to collaborate. So what we are trying to do is recognize that right now in this moment, if you look between 2022 and 2024, of the breakdowns that we give across Massachusetts via Bill Galvin, the Democratic Party had the least growth of any of the parties. The Republican Party went higher, our unenrolled voters went higher, our voters for the pizza party, the pirate party, all of our undesignated, those folks had higher growth than the Democratic Party. We need to fix that. If you look at our US Senator's race, we had the lowest percentage of victory in a US Senator's race with a beloved incumbent that we have had since 2013. We got issues, people. And the only way we can do it is just sit down and figure it out. So what I'm trying to do is put together in coalition with other folks, a group of people that if you want to run for office, we'll go ahead and we'll get some people who are campaign professionals. We'll work together to support you in a way that we can help you run for office without the big bill of running for office. We can train people who have not had access to the political machine to learn how to be a field organizer, learn how to be a campaign manager, learn how to be a campaign fundraiser, learn how to be a candidate. We have our friends at Emerge, we have friends in other communities that are willing to work with us. We're just trying to get people out there. And for folks who find none of that the least bit appealing, we're trying to teach people how to testify at public meetings. Trust me, there's gonna be a lot of that coming up. We want to make sure that you make, and shout out to the 10th Bristol, we make sure all of your elected officials work for their, somehow not as much as they probably should be getting paid for this crap, but work for that paycheck. We wanna make sure you know how to get in touch with Mark, you know how to get in touch with everybody throughout, you know how to get in touch with Sheriff Joe McDonald and tell him to let up with, I'm gonna mess the abbreviation up, but let up with whatever he has going on that Liv can help you with better than I can. We wanna make sure that we all know how to activate so that when, for instance, we have situations like book bannings, that you on this part of the state can reach out to folks on the other part of the state and be, been there, done that, here are our resources, here's the path to victory, boom, let's shut them down, shut them up before they get started. Because to be absolutely frank, they are organizing and they're doing a way better job than we are. A way better job than we are. So it's time for us to start shaking it off, getting to it. And I am just gonna go to my absolute, and please forgive my lack of eloquence, all of you who know me know that I'm a rambler and I'm a talker. But I will say, we do have, oh, there we go, there's that. On the last page, this is part of what we're trying to do. We're trying to work collectively to bring people together across communities. We have mutual aid efforts working throughout Brockton. We have mutual aid South Shore, mutual aid Cape and Islands, as well as the mutual aids throughout the Merrimack Valley, Worcester, and Western Mass to make all of these organizations work together. We are trying to do issue-based organizing for folks, and frankly, it appeals more to some of our younger voters and to our unenrolled voters. There is a reason why people leaving the Democratic Party, why we may not know exactly what that is. We do also know that when it comes down to the issues, the majority of voters within Massachusetts agree with us on the issues. I think to wrap up, what I want to say is that, you know, none of us are an expert in what's coming down. We all have certain awareness through a variety of our communities, of our jobs, whatever we're doing. We know through one way or another that bad things are going to happen. Community information and hard work is what's going to get us through this, but we're going to get through this, and we're going to do it together. And I just want to say, if anybody has time to spare, or if anybody has, you know, any interest in getting involved, some of what we're doing is putting together, if you want to scan through that, it's a simple Google form just asking name, email address, your zip code. The reason why it's asking zip code is so that we can see who your state reps, state senators are. We're going to try to hold everybody accountable, and we're going to try to put feet to the fire and make certain that we are protected in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and also looking forward, making certain that, you know, our surrounding states and communities are also safe, and making certain that we take back some of these seats that never should be read, like Plymouth County Sheriff, like Plymouth County freaking District Attorney. We want to make sure that we do this, and also looking forward to 2026. 2026 is no joke. If we can work hard and get 2026 done, you know, we can make him a lame duck before he should be a lame duck. And yes, that might bring a volatile piece out in him, but it gives us a fighting chance. So if we can make it through the next 24 months, we got this, and we can. So let's look towards 2026. Recognize, you know, of our 9 congressional districts, we have a solid chance that a few of them are going to step down and retire. And knowing that more likely than not, based on current power mapping, that is going to put a lot of fight in our life. So let's see what we can do. Let's get these things together. Let's make sure that we're checking in with our state committee members. Let's make sure that we are checking in with our state committee, making certain that we are reaching out to folks who may not be Democrats, but may fall within the same political sphere. And let's get through this together. And I'm going to let all y'all go.
With that, I'm going to open up the floor to anyone that has any questions of either or each of our 4 presenters. So have at it, and then we're going to let Mark have the final say.
Oh, no. We love you.
Okay, why don't we start with Diane right here?
Yeah, I have a question for Liv. This morning in the Globe, they talked about 3 states that had laws banning. You talked a little bit about
Banning book banning?
banning, yes, exactly. Is that something that's possible to do, that's on the radar, and actual
It's something that is possible. I don't know if there is going to be a bill specifically introduced that outright bans book bans. The bill that Senator Sear had introduced last year was more about establishing a framework for book challenges, because there could be a legitimate reason to challenge a book. The problem is that it's often just a guise for, you know, people not wanting our kids to read about, you know, anyone who doesn't look like them. But yes, can you remind me the states again?
All I can remember is Minnesota.
New Jersey.
New Jersey just passed the bill yesterday. Yeah.
I know our team is looking at some of that legislation that outright bans it to check in on the language, but I'm not aware of that particular bill in Massachusetts yet.
Okay, I'm gonna go with Nikki, then we'll work our way back.
Yeah, thank you very much for all this information, and you know, it just makes you sick knowing what's going to come along, but it's very encouraging to say, Jess, that there's so many people that are so interested, and I just wonder how we're going to organize ourselves, and you know, how can we be helpful? You know, just sitting here and thinking, you know, what can we do right now Can we talk to people that can, and give them information? I don't know what it is, but what can we do to be helpful?
I can tell you what we've been, the good things that's been happening is people have come forward. People have said, Helena, what can we do to help you? So we are, a couple things, we're starting we have our ESL classes, which is English as a second language, is just full. So we're actually starting another one, hopefully in January at the beginning. And sometimes we need volunteers in the classroom, or it could be volunteers to help people prepare for their citizenship, right? So there's a few options. Another thing where we have seen is an increase of people now that have green cards in a hurry to become U.S. citizens. People said, oh, I have my green card, I'm fine. No, you're not fine. If you have a green card, and if you get in trouble, you're out of here. Yeah. So really making sure that the increase of citizenship, so before we apply for citizenship, we go through a criteria, like a criteria. So what we're doing is we're also getting people who want to come in and volunteer. We're actually going to be doing a training, basically, if you want to screen people about to see if they qualify for citizenship. A lot of them, you do not need to speak another language, right? Mm-hmm. So it's important because people say, I want to help you, Helena, but I can't speak another language. Mm-hmm. So these are things that they can, I would say, reach out. I have my card here, I have business, I have information here. Reach out and I can put you like on a list, and then we can go through, because all of our, of course, as we all know, all of our volunteers, they have to go a query check and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So we have to go through that first, and then we would that absolutely then give you options that you can volunteer. We're also looking at having a citizenship clinic. Mm-hmm. And making sure that people, not only do we have citizenship clinics, we want to make sure we help from A to Z with the whole process, to the point they even get sworn in at the Immigrants Assistance Center. So we actually have a citizenship ceremony. We have them 3 times a year, and where about 29 people get sworn in as U.S. citizens. And then what we register them to vote right on the spot. And so really important. So there's several opportunities, and I mean, reach out. Let's figure out where you can fit and what we can do to help. Because I do think that one of the things that we see a lot is that the amount of people who, like you, who are very supportive, and what can we do to help? What can we do to help? And so I think that is, there's lots of course, volunteer opportunities that you have. But I have to say that out of my 41 years almost, that I've been at the Immigrants Assistance Center, one thing that always gives me so much hope is when we have these citizenship ceremonies. We've helped thousands of people become U.S. citizens. I'm a naturalized citizen. I became a citizen when I was 20. I went through the whole process, and I know how intimidating it is. Mm-hmm. And so being able to have these 3 times a year, having citizenship ceremonies, I think there was like 29 people from 14 different countries that get sworn in. It is the most, if you have never attended, it is absolutely the most powerful event. Every time I see it, I cry every single time we have, because it brings me back to how I became a citizen and how with the whole process that I've gone. And it's just so, and there's just so, it's emotional and powerful at the same time. And just seeing people like, being so excited to register to vote is just so powerful. I just want to tell you a little story. I had a client, very quickly. She's 100 years old. She's a client of the Immigrants Assistance Center. And she came in, and I heard her say something about renewing a green card. I'm like, oh my God, I've known Senora Gracinda for like so many years. What do you mean? Oh, I just turned 100. The only thing there's no way I'm going to pass my citizenship ceremony. And I looked at her, sharp as really sharp. I'm like, what do you mean? She goes, I said, you've been a green card holder since 1973. And I'm looking, and I said, it's so easy. She says, it is? I said, yes. I said, that's it. I got in touch with immigration, USC, Dennis Reardon, whom I've known since 1994, a wonderful gentleman. And I said, Dennis, she's 100 years old. She wants to become a citizen. I said, we're going to do the application right away because she doesn't have much time. She doesn't have much time. So we filled out the citizenship application. I sent it to him. They went to her house. Wow. They did her fingerprints. They tested her. And they gave her a private ceremony at the Immigrants Assistance Center. And she's sworn in as a U.S. citizen. And then I took her to the polls. She's a Dartmouth resident. I took her to the polls. I said, you are voting. And she was so emotional. And she says, I can't believe it. She goes, but I was funny because I picked her up from home to take her. I picked her up to take her to the polls, and she says to me, Helena, I couldn't sleep all night. I said, why? Because I thought I was going to die. And I was going to be So I took her to the polls. And as soon as she voted, she got in my car. She said, now I need a drink. I said, she's 100 years old. So I just wanted to tell, I wanted to share that beautiful story with all of you, because those stories give me hope, and that is why I keep doing what I've been doing for over 40 years.
Yeah, I have a question, Helena. How could we help with the children if they are left, if the parents get deported? You said that you're arranging for people.
Okay, so it's not, the arrangement is, for example, it's people they know, right? So if I am, like I said with Lisa, right? If I'm, like, for example, if I'm a family, I'm a mother, and I'm undocumented, and I have 3 children, of course I'm gonna talk to Lisa. She's a friend of mine. I trust her. She's a US citizen, and I know that she's going to be able to reunite me with my children. So if it's people like that. So if you know of families, for example, that are mixed immigration, right? That you trust, and you know they trust you very much, and they know you, and they say, "Hey, I'd like you to assign you, for example, as an affidavit that if something happens to me, I trust you. You can take care of my children." So you can do that, but of course, it's someone who knows the family, whom they trust, because so then they can be reunited with their children. I don't think no one wants to leave their children behind. I just want to make sure. So it's people that if you know someone that is in this situation, that we can, the affidavit of support, the emergency family preparedness is really, really important. We hope they never have to use it. We hope they never have to use it, but at least there's the plan in place. I'm sorry, Corinn, go ahead.
Yeah, no, and just when you're thinking about how can I help, we've been in touch with immigration attorneys and trying to think about where some of these friction points will probably end up is a lot of times people who end up in district court. Sometimes if you're stopped by state police, or we had a situation where a couple of moms who were dropping off their kids, and now with the new license law, people are driving vans and dropping off their kids. They were criminally charged with being supposedly livery drivers. Now these moms are gonna have to go into district court and face a magistrate's hearing. Having somebody from like this group, for example, accompanying someone in district court could really maybe make a difference between the situation that they could find themselves in, or at the very least be a channel for information to be able to ask, where are you taking Maria? Where is she going? And how can I inform her family about her whereabouts? So unfortunately, those kinds of things are going to be coming up more frequently.
So in terms of the court system, would we be able to get that information from either of you or your organizations? So
Yeah.
we could organize groups that can go and help support the people in court?
Yeah, sometimes it's just locating where they are. Like we've got phone calls that say, my husband didn't come home, where is he, right? And really going into the website of USCIS and figure out locator. There's a locator that you can do that. And of course, we do have also received quite a few retired attorneys that want to help. So that's going to be, I think that's going to be really key to find.
And I just want to pop in, and I do think this is one of the pieces that is where everybody can hop in and help out, be it, in these specific circumstances, and then looking at the broader, all of the onslaught of the situations. Right now, we need to get scrappy. And I think that in moments like this, you look at Project 2025, yes, it was a well-researched document, but it was also scrappy as hell. Like, they basically took and bastardized the common decency that we think our judicial system and our legislative system works in order to make a horrific circumstance. We need to backwards engineer that. We need to take the attorneys among us and make them helpers. We need to take the creatives among us and have them put out talking points. We need to think of ways that, as much as if you can take the law and the puzzle that is our judicial system and our legislative system, and you can make some horrific things come forward, then we can take that same exact system and we can make some wonderful things come forward. We need to find ways that we can always be there. We need to make certain that people are working within community so that when inevitably, I have an econ degree. You don't have to tell me what's going to happen with 25% tariffs in Canada and Mexico. Buy your coffee now, stock up on vitamin C pills, because it's about to get ugly. So get your little victory gardens a la 1943 back up and going, because we're going to have issues. But what this means is for people living in apartment complexes, people living in the city that aren't able to take a little plot of land and grow some things, we're going to need to make certain that people are getting food to get them. So talk to your mutual aids. I have people on my DTC who are attorneys who want to know how they can help. Well, this is a simple chain of how community organizing works. When we had an issue in Pembroke, a friend of mine works for the State Department, also is a Pembroke parent who had a child who was being harassed and affected by the pride flag banning in Pembroke High School. I knew Nikki had worked on something similar. Nikki went ahead and spoke to Liv, who I've had the privilege of working with on something altogether different. When you're in community and when you're talking to people, we're able to work through with things like this. It's a simple matter of knowing that here's your person who's your flagpole in your community. This person, if nothing else, can connect the dots and get people together, because we don't necessarily have the privilege anymore of expecting that the entirety of our government will do the good work of government for us anymore. So we need to get scrappy. We need to look out for ourselves. We need to, if nothing else in the world, forgive me if because I do not know, take whatever means necessary and pledge $5 a month to their organizations. Take whatever means necessary and make certain that your state rep is locked and loaded for, forgive the gun thing, I hate guns, that was horrific, but whatever the phrase is, all ready to go for 2026, so that when inevitably someone who is very far right stages a challenge against him, he has the financial resources ready and he has the network ready, that we don't have to worry about the 10th Bristol, that we can focus on another race. What I did in Plymouth County and was very fortunately able to do with the 7 women that were running for state rep was put together money to where they now have the ability to not worry about fundraising for this next upcoming cycle. They're good. 6 of them moved through, 1 we lost, and we're gonna get it back. And, ultimately, it's doing that and then making certain that other people who don't have a shot, frankly, wouldn't it be nice if we had a person representing the city of Brockton that represents the majority of the people in Brockton, instead of keep electing people who are from other towns, etc. We've got, obviously Rita's in there, but we've got folks who just are not necessarily representative of the people they're representing, because of the fact these are the folks who have had access to the political machine. And if you don't know how to run a campaign, you don't know how to run a campaign. If you don't know how to politically fundraise, you don't. But if all of us work together, get scrappy, get money, get resources, we can really change this. And if we're gonna burn it down, we might as well build it back better.
Yep, absolutely. And one of the motivating factors in putting this forum together really was the day after the election, I woke up and I went, and I thought to myself, this area has been a target of the state Republican committee, they've been a target of the local Republican committee, and they're going to be a target of the national Republican committee. And the reason they're going to be a target of the national Republican committee is because of Tom Hodgson. Tom Hodgson was Donald Trump's state of Massachusetts campaign manager. He's very close with the GOP chair here in town, Paul Criscullo. He's very close to Joe Pyers, who Mark whooped in the election. Joe Pyers and his contingent from Rochester and a few folks from Mattapoisett, not so much Marion, thank you, Marion. They have been a steady beat of the drum of book banning, anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-black. I mean, Joe Pyers claims that racism doesn't exist in the local schools, when in fact we know it does.
Period. It doesn't
So
exist.
we know that they're gonna target us, they're gonna target our town committee, they're gonna target the school, they're gonna target policy, they're gonna target curriculum. So one of the things that I've prided myself on with our committee is we've always been ahead of the curve. So is Rochester, so is Marion. So we gotta stay 10 steps ahead of everybody, especially the Republican locally, the Republican committee locally. I don't think they've caught up to us locally. Statewide they have, nationally they have, and we've gotta make better strides in that regard.
And we do need to remember that, 2021, January, or 2022, January 6, 2022, right down the street from where I live, at the Emerald Inn, I forget what it's called, the Emerald, function hall, they had the first annual and continuous Plymouth County Republican Party anniversary of just celebration of our freedom, our January 6th Freedom March that was attended by virtually every Republican in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Let's not forget that Jim Jordan, Jim Jordan, showed up in Plymouth County for 7 different speaking events last cycle to train people how to run for office. We need to recognize that we are already on fire. We are done, burned down. Like, let's get this taken care of. Let's take care of folks and let's work with our community partners.
Yep. So, let me take a question back here. Go
This
ahead,
goes
Joe.
back to the local school committee, last election. And that, you're familiar with this. They're receiving outside funding to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars from special interest groups in Colorado, other places out of state, sending out these really misleading mailers, but very, very slick. I'm sure you guys all saw them.
Oh, sure, yeah.
So, on the local level, we've got to do something to be able to raise sufficient funds to put out our own story, because when you've got local candidates who are funding their own campaign with $200 out of their own pocket and losing.
Yeah, I agree. So interestingly, that independent expenditure pact that was active during the municipal elections last year and the year before, including the school committee races, was not active in the statewide race of Joe Pyers. In fact, that IE pact seems to have morphed into the organization Tri-Town for Protecting Children, which is the Eckert kind of 501c3 that they've established that has donated money to upgrade the playground in Rochester that certain of our members have been fighting because of what Tri-Town for Protecting Children actually stands for. But we're well aware they're able to raise money better than we can, unfortunately. And they have 2 very wealthy donors in Rochester that have pretty much put all of their money into that organization. Now, previously with the IE PAC, it was like Concerned Citizens for Rochester Government, Good Government or something. So, technically, legally, they're not supposed to coordinate with the candidates. We know they coordinated, we just couldn't prove it. And we still have complaints that are being investigated with OCPF against that independent expenditure PAC. I know they haven't closed the complaints yet. But yeah, we are able to create our own IE PAC. We just need some wealthy people to give us some money. So if you know of anybody.
I know this is a very broad question, but what do we do about the tsunami of misinformation? And how do we channel something so people trust where they go and they know they're getting the information they need in whatever category we're talking about?
So that's a really interesting question, because this election cycle was absolutely dominated by misinformation.
Absolutely.
Mainly, obviously, on the right-wing side. I don't think we have the equivalent of a left-wing Joe Rogan. And I didn't even know who Joe Rogan was before this election, so I still really don't. But they're better at getting their message out, and they have big money. They got Elon Musk, they have Peter Thiel, they have Rupert Murdoch. How do we find the equivalent on the left side of the spectrum, or even not even the left side, but more in the middle? You know, they tried Air America back in the, early 2000s, that's Rachel Maddow got her start really, but we don't have that equivalent, but you're right, we need that. We need something like that to counter the misinformation. And I think all you can do is just, when you see misinformation, get it out there and call it what it is. We have a Facebook page called Tri-Town for Truth. Check it out. We call out the local GOP, local polls for the misinformation they put out on their different social media platforms. And that's all you can do. You can write letters to the editor of the different newspapers. I don't know if you guys have any other ideas on how you can.
I don't have a solution necessarily about the general public, but I think that one thing you can do is be messengers of the truth, specifically for our legislators, who are going to hear a lot of stuff about all the different things that we care about, and I think it's going to be really important on the policy front to be as active as you can in reaching out to your elected officials at all levels to sort of break that barrier, because sometimes all it takes is a few phone calls to a legislative office from, you know, some group that maybe was organized from a different state to scare elected officials into not doing something that we all want them to do. And so to reach out to your legislators, to let them know that you have their back when they are doing good things, and really putting pressure on them. I think we can't take for granted our our super democratic state legislature. We have a Democratic governor, but it can be really difficult to get policy work done in Massachusetts.
Well, and we know too that Trump is gonna come after Maura. We know that. Yeah. Maura Healey was the most active attorney general during the Trump years in suing him for his horrific policies. So he's already vowed that he's gonna seek some type of retribution, whether it's cutting off funding for infrastructure projects, cutting off funding for education projects. He will find a way because he is an awful person. So with that, I'm going to segue, because we're talking about putting pressure on our legislators. I'm going to segue to Representative-elect Mark Silver.
That was smart, Nick. You wait till the end and the first thing that I want to do, given we have so many people here from Democratic town committees across the 10th Bristol District and outside of that, I really just want to say thank you. It was a tough election. It was even a tough election for us. I think we were all thinking this is going to be a Harris wave, and it wasn't. It was the exact opposite. And so I know that night we were at Travelers Ale House. The numbers are coming in. Matt, my campaign manager, amazing. Give him a round of applause. We were looking at the numbers, and Rochester came in first, and then Acushnet came in after that, and then New Bedford was a little unclear. So we were a little worried at that point, but then when Fairhaven came in and Marion and Mattapoisett came in, we felt really good, and in the end it was almost a 1,400 vote victory. So that happened because of all of you in this room and the people that you talked to and how you mobilized and got people out to vote. So thank you very much. The election results are on the Secretary of State's website. They're now official. They were unofficial for a while, but now they're official. So if you want to see breakdown how things went for the 10th Bristol District or any races, I encourage you to go look. It's a good message for us in this wave of redness that happened. We were a bright spot, and that had everything to do with all of the work that we did, knocking doors, listening to people on the street, being in places where maybe we wouldn't otherwise be expected to be. And that's how we're going to continue to win elections. As Jess said, we have to be mobilized, well organized, have a good message, and believe it or not, be positive. As hard as that can be sometimes, the person who's more positive, who has clarity and is honest and expresses clarity is normally the best candidate. That doesn't mean that if somebody throws a curveball at you. Trust me, when we didn't have a PAC invest in the race against us, but we did have the state GOP send out a text. Some of you may have gotten it. So I'm that head, and there was a hand above my head with little strings, and it was supposed to suggest that somehow I was bought and sold by the clean energy industry. Some people wanted us to go on the attack right away, and we said no. Because at the end of the day, when we were knocking doors, people said, I'm so tired of the negativity. Now, that doesn't necessarily explain why some people decided they felt Donald Trump was the better messenger of positivity. I think we can talk about cost of living issues and a whole bunch of other things, and we can keep going back and looking at what went wrong, but we just have to move forward as communities and organize, and that's really important. The kitchen cabinet, the people who are the brain trust, raise your hand if you were part of the kitchen cabinet. There are several people from your communities that were there to help guide us through this process. So having a good organization is really important. Now, moving forward, because I'm still technically Representative-elect Sylvia, I got my first letter from the House Clerk's office and it said, the Honorable Mark Sylvia, and I started laughing. And please call me Mark. Call me Mark now, call me Mark on the street. You don't need to call me Representative Sylvia. That can be reserved for the floor of the House chamber, and that's fine with me. Swearing in is on January 1st, so that's when the legislature by constitution is sworn in, the House and the Senate. So we get sworn in first, then the governor delivers her state of the state, and then we're off to the races. In terms of what I'm gonna do to prepare, we have the new Legislators Academy, which starts tomorrow at UMass Amherst. So there are 19 freshman reps that will be going, including Steve Willett. I know Tim Caton's here. Tim was a big supporter and driver for Steve's victory. That was a tough race because there were 5 people in the general, but he got it done. So that's Steve, that's Michelle Badger in Plymouth, who's amazing. So I'm looking forward to being part of a class of people who really want to roll up their sleeves and get things done.
Can I ask a question about that?
Yeah.
Do they get to elect the president of the freshman class?
They do.
So you gotta run for it?
I'm 50 years old. Like I just want to go in and get stuff done. So, if nominated, I will accept. In January, we'll have a couple press releases and posts socially to go out about office hours. I intend to do office hours throughout the district on a rolling basis, either at Council on Aging's or other municipal buildings. So please, afford yourself of that opportunity, but we'll be, in some instances, hopefully doing it with the state senator, because there are 3 state senators that share the 10th Bristol District, so I'll try and coordinate with them. We're working on a reboot of our website. Jessica is doing that. Jessica is amazing. All the social media we did, if you were sick and tired of hearing from us, that's because Jessica was really good at her job. So thank you very much, Jessica. And you're gonna get sick of us some more because we're gonna be upping our game on social media as well. I do have an aide. Each freshman legislator gets 1 legislative aide. If you're on a committee or if you're in leadership, you get more. So I get 1 aide. It's not official until I'm sworn in, and then you can offer the job to the person, then they accept. But I can tell you who it is because she said she will accept when I offer it to her on January 1st, so I feel comfortable with it. Her name is Betty DeBenedictis. Some of you may have heard of Betty. I know Betty from way back in my Plymouth days. She was the legislative aide for Democratic Representative Tom Coulter for 10 years in Kingston. And she's been the legislative aide for Rhett Muratori, who Michelle Badger is replacing. She's got 18 years of experience. She's super well respected by both parties. She's super well respected by staff, by the Speaker's office. And I really wanted to find somebody who has more experience than I do on Beacon Hill, so we don't mess around and we get moving right away. So she'll be joining us. You're all gonna get to know her. You'll get as sick of her as you are of our social media and of me. She's wonderful, and so I just wanted to let you know that. I'm resigning from my current job, so state rep will be my only occupation. I work right now for Blue Wave. I'll be resigning as of December 31st, and I'll be your rep full-time, all the time, every day. So, and I just also wanted to say, we're gonna have to prioritize which committees we'd like to be on. That doesn't mean you're gonna get any of those, but they're gonna ask us which committees we'll be on. So I'm still trying to figure that out and want to align my committee assignment preferences with what's most important to our district as opposed to something that's not related. So more to come on that. There are tons of caucuses to join. I was told, don't join too many caucuses. So I am joining the Portuguese American Caucus. That one I've already made a decision on. And then same thing with legislation. I think bills have to be filed by the 18th of January for the session. So I'm starting to compile a list of legislation that I would like to file. I've heard from some of you already about priorities that you have. So if you have any ideas or thoughts, reach out. There's a lot of issues. I think in general, there's like 7,000 bills filed at the beginning of a session. So it's a lot, but not that many. It's like 200 to 300 that actually get enacted, because there's a lot of omnibus bills where they pull a bunch of different bills into a great bill. And that's it. The only other thing is that I promised to Nikki and Ann and to Sharon and to Mike. We also won because the Democratic Town Committees in the 10th Bristol District, in particular those four, and with help from the City Committee in New Bedford, we were victorious. We didn't rely on the state party for much at all. We actually did the work ourselves, and that's good because that makes us resilient and ready to go for the next one. So my commitment is to participate and be engaged with all of the DTCs to make sure we're recruiting, to make sure we're all staying together and talking about these issues together. So I want a big shout out to the DTCs. And my final commitment on that one is that we'll get a Democratic Town Committee in Acushnet come hell or high water. So thank you, happy holidays, onward and upward, as they say.
We have to bring this to a close. We're gonna have all of these folks' contact information on our Matt Dems Facebook page, on our Matt Dems website. Francis is our tech wizard, so we will figure out how to get it out to the community. Helena has information here. But I want to thank everybody for coming. I think it's really important that we really understand what our job is going forward. We have to organize. We need to start at the ground level. We got to find candidates. We got to support these candidates for local office, school committee, select board, water department, sewer commission, board of health. I mean, library board of trustees. They're going to come after every single position, so we got to start working. So with that, I want to thank our panel, Liv, Helena, Corinn, Jess, thank you very much. Thank you to my everybody, have a great holiday. We'll see you in January.